We got to talk about this new headline. There is a lot actually to unpack in this one very dense headline. So I'm going to just read the headline and then we can break it down.
Yeah.
So here's the headline. Canada to ban sale of new fuel-powered cars and light trucks from 2035. Okay. So Canada's putting their foot down. They're saying no more gas cars and light truck sales in Canada starting in 2035. So that's what, 14 years from now?
Yeah, it's not that far away.
So there's a lot.
There's a lot.
There's a lot here. Let's start with Canada.
For sure.
Shout out to Canada. Lots of great Canadian friends on the internet. Yeah, there's not a lot of countries that will just outright ban something as a whole like that, but Canada's one of them, and they'll do that. I feel like they're neighbors down here in the US. It would never happen that way, but there's lots of companies you will see building up to committing to EVs.
Exactly.
Like Ford or Audi or whoever will say, we're going to offer a bunch of EVs by this date. And it's kind of just up to how committed they want to be or how far they think they can get. So Canada's just straight up saying, like, as a committing to the environment, like, we will not have any more sales of gas cars. So that brings us to the second thing, banning sales.
Yes.
Because we have to double check on this. They're not banning the manufacture of certain things. You'll still be allowed to manufacture gas cars anywhere. You'll still be allowed to have all the same economics. But starting when this takes place in 2035, you will not be able to buy a new gas car or light truck in 2035.
So that's one thing even there I'm trying to figure out. I didn't see it in the article, but I'm assuming it's new. I'm assuming
yes,
they're not going to destroy
new.
Oh, it does say okay. Yeah.
So you will I guess be able to buy a used gas car because it was already made. You can buy someone else's car from someone, but as far as manufacturers that are selling their new cars in Canada, if they want to sell any car in Canada, it cannot be fuel powered.
Yeah,
that's basically
it has to
how it
have
goes.
zero emissions.
Yeah. So if you're Toyota and you want to ship cars over to North America, you better have an electric version to sell to Canada. Otherwise, you're not selling any to any Canadians.
Yeah,
basically.
I guess the only other there's like, is hydrogen powered still like really a thing? We haven't. It just has to have zero emissions. Like, we're going to say EV for the rest of this because that's what we assume.
Yeah.
There could be some crazy new, I
Could
doubt
be
it.
fuel cell.
You never
could
know.
be
But it just has to
hydrogen.
be zero emissions for the sake of clearly protecting climate change.
That's safe. Okay. Then the next is actually kind of key, cars and light trucks. And I think that's something to take note of because I had to look up the definition of light trucks, and that includes like obviously the F-150s of the world, but also like lots of other trucks people use for work.
Yeah.
That loops those in too. So it's not just recreational cars people are buying. It's also when people are forced to upgrade their fleets of trucks for their light duty, construction or whatever jobs, they are going to have to start to buy electric versions by 2035. So that loops in light trucks as well.
I wonder how intense that gets because like, my guess, so the first thing I think of when I think light truck, I think of a truck that doesn't have to tow pretty much. And like, I totally get that because I don't think we're at the mileage in EVs or, maybe we will be in 14 years, but it's hard to make that pledge now. Towing is the big thing that I do think probably gas cars are benefiting in now because when you have to tow things at a certain time, in a certain time period, like that charging does actually add up. So I'm assuming that's why it says light trucks. I don't know where that lands in the fleet section, though. How many loopholes there will be of people being like, I just have a smaller F-150, but I tow stuff, so I need a gas-powered.
So I feel like that brings me to the last part of the headline, which is 2035.
Yeah.
There will be different leadership probably by 2035. There will be lots of advancements in tech by 2035. There will just be a different landscape in Canada and its surrounding neighbors by 2035.
For sure.
So it's sort of this like really far out target that we think makes sense. Actually, I'll get to the reactions in a second, but I think makes a lot of sense to say, okay, we're just going to set this target out so you guys all know, everybody in Canada, you all know, by 2035, don't plan on actually having the ability to buy a gas car starting in this year. Couple deeper thoughts on that. One, today and probably forever, Canada's cold. And so electric cars in Canada specifically have a harder time in the winter because the range is less, because you have to heat up the battery. And that's been something people in the Northeast deal with. they pretty much only sell all-wheel drive cars in Canada. No one wants rear-wheel drive in Canada because it snows out there. You need a certain type of car. And so for that reason, a lot of Canadians have avoided EVs because they have much worse range in the winter.
Yeah, I think I actually wrote something down that it's only like 3% of cars sold in Canada are EV.
Yeah. So if you're thinking about, and that's like, 3% sounds very small, but that's still like 3 out of every 100 cars sold that are new are electric. It's pretty low, but it's not bad.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking like, all right, so by 2035, 14 years from now, will the tech be good enough? I think so. But will the tech be good enough that that range drop off in the winter is no longer a concern? I hope so. But I just want to talk about the 2 different reactions that I've seen to this headline. Yeah. So again, the headline is Canada banning the sale of new fuel-powered cars and light trucks by 2035. The 2 different reactions I've seen are 1, 2035 is way too late, and the other is 2035 is way too early. That's the 2 very different reactions I've seen. I don't know if I fall in one camp or the other. I think this is a pretty reasonable target. If I'm looking at,
I agree with you completely. I think this is a great headline, a perfect headline for people for journalists and news websites, pretty much. Like, this is going to get reactions because of that. People are looking at this at total extremes. The sale of I wish I had a statistic here, but like new cars they sell a lot. But if you look at how many people buy used cars because they're cheaper and they're still super reliable, like the used sale market is insane.
Yeah.
So there's still going to be so many gas cars sold in 2035 in Canada, as long as all this stays there. So with all the EVs increasing, we're going to see a lot less gas cars, but there are still going to be a ton of gas cars.
Yeah.
And that's just for regular consumers too.
Yeah. And so the line right under the headline is Canada will ban the sale of fuel burning cars and new light duty trucks from 2035 in an effort to reach net zero emissions across the country by 2050. So like you said, people are still going to keep buying gas cars, but eventually the turnover as people get new cars will be so much that we can try to attack this net zero emissions thing. But yeah, that first reaction of 2035 is way too late. On one hand, I get that because I don't know if I just retweeted another random video of the ocean on fire. Like, the climate crisis is real.
It's 100% real.
It's pretty real. And the fact that, we give it another 14, 15 years of sort of business as usual, not really incentivizing buying electric cars. I mean, I think there is a tax incentive in Canada, but it's just not the same as banning gas cars. So another 15 years of gas cars to a lot of people seems like a long time. But the other half of that, 2035 is way too early, I think comes from people who are looking at the current state of electric cars and the infrastructure, importantly, around them. And that is a much bigger challenge. Because now that we have, there's good electric cars out. I think you can buy today in Canada an all-wheel drive Model 3 and be pretty happy despite like a little less range in the winter. But the charging networks, all the other alternate, I'll call them EVs that don't charge at Tesla superchargers, but all the other EVs that don't charge at Tesla superchargers that have to rely on the infrastructure that's being built out right now, that seems kind of bleak. Like, if you're looking at the current state of, okay, if I were to get an electric car sometime in the next few years, would that be okay? So that's where a lot of people are coming from. They're like, I don't have a garage. I need to depend on where the chargers are, and there's nothing anywhere near my house. I live in this part of Canada. And I get that too. So it's sort of right in the middle for me.
I find that funny because to me, infrastructure seems like something where 15 years from now, I don't see it being any issue.
I think honestly, you're probably right.
I think just we're seeing such an influx in all these other people joining the EV thing that they're going to have to figure out chargers. Just like chargers are going to be something that just blow up soon. And the charging aspect of it, while clearly there's like technology involved in it, I don't think it's as crazy as creating a whole car at a certain price point and all that. Like, infrastructure has to happen, and their cars are going to be affected by it. So they're going to have to pump that out fast, and they're already pumping it out decently well. I think Tesla and all the other manufacturers, infrastructure wise, will be everywhere in 15 years is a long time. In the tech, I'll be 40 5 in 2035.
I really hope you're right, but it's also like, it's more than even just building chargers. There's lots of people saying like the grid can't handle that many new chargers. Like we want there to be,
very fair point.
Right, and that's like billions of dollars of building and stuff, where we're like, all right, we need to make as many chargers as there are gas stations. Sure, we can pour money into building the chargers, but can we support all of the cars in Canada using all of those chargers all the time? That's like underground type infrastructure. Will that be ready in 14 years?
That I don't know about. And I guess the other thing is, if this is, 2035 isn't the net zero emissions part, but 2050 is, and not all EV chargers are producing zero emissions. Like you're getting electricity from coal burning places at some point. They're causing emissions. That's just so I think it's a great step. Like you said, I don't think it's as intense as either of those sides look, but I cannot wait. Well, I can wait to be 45, but I cannot wait to see what the landscape of EVs and just cars in general are going to be up there. Yeah. And I applaud Canada for taking a stance like this. You said too, and this is something I wondered, and hopefully someone in the comments or on Discord or something can help us out here, but we have term limits in the US, so I think this would be super hard for a president of the US to ever pledge or ban, because in 15 years they're gone. Yep. Who's going to say the next person's not just going to overwrite that? I don't know how it works in Canada, and I think the UK has made a similar pledge banning them by 2030, I think. But I also don't know how elections work in both of those. Will these prime ministers be there till that time to oversee it? Yeah, I think that's all interesting. I don't think the US could do it. California, though, as a state has done it.
Right. That's kind of what I'd more expect in the US.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's always funny when you see these deadlines set so far out. I feel like they always move. Like whenever you hear like, oh, we're going to do this thing. Remember like 10 years ago when we heard about how many EVs they'd be making by 2020 and 2025, and they're not really doing
I don't remember that.
yet.
I remember like 2 or 3 years ago when they all started doing like anywhere from 25 to 50. Almost every car manufacturer has pledged. But
There's been a couple missed deadlines.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I think those two together, though, might be what kind of puts us in the right direction, though, because, I'm a car manufacturer and I promise by 2050 to have purely EV. But I'm a car manufacturer and I can change that whenever I want because I don't really care. And when you're a big company, you don't seem to hit the repercussions quite as hard as some other places. But if now you have a potential total loss of sales in a country, Canada's the second largest country by landmass, which obviously is different population wise. They have a lot of the northern aspects of it, but like it's not a small country to be taking sales away from. So if I'm a car manufacturer now, it's like, oh no, I'm going to lose a huge, especially those big, like I'm sure Subaru does really well up there with all-wheel drive. I'm sure Toyota does great up there. I'm sure Ford does great up there. Yeah. Sure. So like they're all probably now like, okay, I need to take our pledge a little more seriously because we're going to lose this huge chunk of sales over there.
Yeah, to me, the companies themselves pledging to move to EVs by a certain year, to me, feels like part PR, part a little bit of internal pressure. Like we want to be good at EVs, so let's just tell ourselves we're going to be good at EVs. Yeah. But like, if we miss the date, like what's going to happen? Nothing's really going to come down and punish us. Where this coming from the other side, where it's like, you won't be allowed to sell here by this year if you don't make an EV. Yeah. And if you only offer a bad EV, like others will swallow your sales and you'll be pretty much out of that country.
And then you lose all loyalty for when you do come out with the EV. It's just totally like a different bad
pressure.
Cycle. Yeah.
Totally different pressure. So that is why I do appreciate this move from Canada. But yeah, I still do want to see, a little more promises from the companies themselves. And I call them promises, but they're just kind of like setting vague targets for themselves.
Statements, exactly
PR statements. The stock price
yeah.
goes up. Look, they said they'd make 50 EVs. Yeah, okay, great. Well, I want to see them. So that's where I'm at, but I appreciate this.
Real quick, while we were discussing all that, Adam looked up, I mentioned new cars versus used cars before. He found a quote that says in 2019, 17 million total vehicles were sold in the US. The rate at which secondhand vehicles increased double compared to new cars. So not 2 times as many new cars, but the rate at which they're being sold. So that's the thing. We're seeing all these new cars that are having longer and longer lives. So like the secondary value of them stays really good, and the secondary car industry is great. So like that's going to keep going. I would not doubt if there are a couple of people who are going to be like, we're going to build gas cars right up to 2035, and they are going to continue to sell at our 100%. Used car dealerships. So,
and every year that the gas car gets better, they last a little bit longer. I think I was reading about this too, but like the average lifespan of a car, meaning the average amount of time someone keeps the car they just bought, for a new car is longer than ever. And for a lot of tech things, it's longer than ever. But basically, if you keep selling your gas car right up until 2030, 2035, they might keep that new gas car for 8-9 years until. So yeah, the whole cycle of like transitioning to sustainable energy for transportation is a long one. This is just one step to hopefully expedite that cycle, that turnover. But yeah,
to me, that's why I think the people on the side of this is way too early, why are we doing this, it'll never work, feels like not a great argument. Listen, trust me, I'm sure there are people out there that have maybe decent arguments, but if your argument is just like, I like gas cars and I enjoy gas cars better than EV, I can't agree with you on that, because if the world gets way too hot and none of us can live in it anymore, who cares what car you're driving?
Might be a hot take. Might be a hot take.
Hot
Might
take.
be very hot. A literal hot take.